Remember when the tech bros tried to push NFTs on us and everyone thought it was the dumbest idea ever and the market totally crashed? Well, what the hell are COD's microtransactions if not some NFT nonsense, bro? I mean, they had one guy draw some pictures of Nicki Minaj and Homelander on his iPad, and now they are selling those pictures individually for like $15 a pop. Like, what the hell? You pull up the COD microtransaction store, it has 500 different packages and bundles and limited time exclusive offers, and you think you are on some streaming service or Amazon about to buy all this cool shit, but in reality, it's just virtual little pictures of stuff. Now granted, some of those little pictures are actual in-game weapons attachments and other useful unlocks that you can use to statistically outperform all the pathetic little normies who didn't cough up the extra $50 or more, but those victories will still be hollow. It's important we understand how microtransactions have hollowed out the COD experience and the COD community, because this game will never realize its full potential so long as it's being used primarily as a platform to hawk NFTs on stupid asses. The best example of how microtransactions ruin a product and lobotomize its community is Twitter. As you may have heard, Twitter also switched to a microtransaction model not too long ago, in the form of selling people blue check marks. Now, the blue check mark used to be just for basic verification, to know who was actually who, because if you search for Nicki Minaj, there'd be like 15 accounts named Nicki Minaj, and you gotta figure out which one is the real one. So they put a blue check mark next to the real one to make that a smooth process for everyone. But there was a population of really stupid tweeters out there, desperate for attention, but completely lacking the wit to actually produce tweets worth reading, and they grew bitter. Bitter at the blue check marks whose tweets were worth reading, whose names were worth searching, and then one day, the messiah of bitter stupid people, the all-time master of try-hard, unfunny tweets with too much emoji spam, Elon Musk, lost $40 billion buying Twitter just so he could strike a blow at all the regular Joes who had better tweets than him. And he succeeded by bringing microtransactions to Twitter. Now you had to buy the blue check mark. Ironically, none of the OG blue check marks ever actually saw the blue check mark as some sort of status symbol. It really was just about verification. But because it was used to verify noteworthy people, the moron Musk stans got it in their head that having the blue check mark made you a somebody when in fact they had it backwards. You weren't a somebody because you had a blue check mark, you got a blue check mark because you were a somebody. And the tragedy is that now, by trying to forcibly purchase the thing, they have completely robbed it of the status they were hoping it would convey. Because now everyone knows the blue checkmark just means you paid money for Twitter, which is embarrassing. The blue checkmark became an albatross, something to be ashamed of, so they introduced a feature where you can hide the blue checkmark after you bought it. It's beyond parody. They killed the status symbol they crave by trying to buy it without having earned it. Because when you change how the reward is achieved, you change what the reward signifies. Musk took it even further and bestowed significant in-game advantages for those willing to pay to play. Their tweets are automatically boosted in the feed and replies above the tweets of anyone who didn't pay. So now, instead of the old days where the best arguments or wittiest jokes made it to the top of your screen based on how much attention they earned organically, we instead have a system where the highest bidders are always on top, and it's just bots, spam, advertisements, tech bros pushing their latest Ponzi schemes, fallacious arguments, and cringeworthy jokes from dipshits who can barely spell. The results for Twitter have been devastating. It's lost billions in value and shed huge swaths of its user base. Also, it could sell the social media equivalent of penis enlargement pills to a bunch of insecure morons. They damaged the quality of the product so they could farm extra revenue out of a hapless minority of its user base. And I would argue that's exactly what's happened with Call of Duty. There was a time when a player's unlocks told a story about who they were and what they had accomplished. Gold camo on your Bowie knife, AA-12 mastery emblem, the global thermonuclear war title. I remember working with my boy Tommy to get the 1,000 emergency airdrops emblem. It was fun and imbued the community with a sense of mutual recognition and the gameplay with added purpose, knowing your efforts would result in something worth bragging about. But the only thing anyone thinks nowadays when they see some skin or crazy unlock, no matter how badass it looks, is, wow, look at this little dweeb who got a hold of their parents' credit card and bought the dumbest thing you could ever spend money on. By making these playful status symbols something you could forcibly purchase, they have robbed them of their playfulness and neutered their status. Because even if some unlocks are still achieved legitimately, how will the average Joe really be able to tell which is which? So there's just no reason to really work for the in-game rewards anymore, a huge blow to the game's overall replay value. As for in-game skill, how can anyone's combat record or in-game achievements of any kind really be respected when none of us can know for sure who spent how much money on easy access to the most powerful guns and attachments in the game? So now COD is pure nihilism. Nothing matters outside of the 150 points popping up on your screen when you kill someone. They damaged the quality of the product so that they could farm extra revenue out of a hapless minority of its user base. Now, we don't have as clear a look into COD's player count or revenue as we did with Twitter, so we can't say for sure how bad the damage is, but it's telling that this year the vast majority of COD's maps were reskins from previous titles, and that they had to reuse the Warzone map for both the campaign and zombies. It certainly feels like a game that was worried it wouldn't turn a profit if it didn't dramatically reduce its production costs. A game trying to skate by on significantly less players and smaller profit margins than it once had. But this is about more than COD's bottom line. You know, the tragedy of what happened to Twitter is that it really was a beautiful tool for mankind. So many of the world's greatest thinkers, artists, writers, and scientists mixed in with journalists and politicians and celebrities, all congregated in one chat room with the rest of us following along like it's Prime Minister's questions, cheering or jeering every new zinger that some cashier at Walmart landed on a billionaire. It had its faults, but I learned so much. It so opened the world to me. It was as if we got to witness the Library of Alexandria in real time. And don't get me wrong, it still has a lot of that going on, but you can tell the vibrancy has taken a hit. Part of what made it great was the meritocratic nature of it. That any Joe Schmo could deliver a brutal takedown of a president or a prime minister for all the world to see just because the tweet was that well written, that biting and hilarious. But now it's just another pay-to-play hierarchy. Your writing matters less than how much dough you dish out. Reading through the replies to any major tweet was always a joy. Now it's just crypto spam and race science or mean-spirited vitriol delivered with zero literary flair. And how many great intellects and great tweets will never reach an audience because they rejected being strong-armed into an arbitrary microtransaction? And so I feel the same way about COD. It's still COD, 20 years on, I still love seeing those 150 points pop up on the screen, but you can tell the community has been hollowed out. Any video game is about voluntarily overcoming unnecessary obstacles to reach imaginary goals. When you slap an extra $50 price tag on the imaginary goals, that's a $110 video game we're talking about. That by itself turns away such large swaths of the player base. COD used to be a working class video game, a playground where nothing mattered but how well you pwned noobs. Now it's just another bourgeois fashion contest where the kids with no money have to have it rubbed in their face that the kids with money are wearing better clothes. It's dumb and it's boring. And when you fuck up the incentive system like that, you unsurprisingly disincentivize people from participating. The long-term thrill of online multiplayer was working towards impressive unlocks and better stats. It gave every kill and every victory extra meaning, extra dopamine as you felt it moving you closer to this or that goal, the satisfaction of making a little progress on this recreational project each day after school, pushing your skill further and testing it in different ways. But it just feels silly to put in that kind of long-term effort when we all know you can get light years further in a heartbeat just by dropping the 20 bucks on it. That whatever you do accomplish, people will just think you bought it. So how many players play how much less? How many would-be tweeters tweet how much less? And what do we lose when we lose the participation of so many of our peers? Both social media and online multiplayer live or die by the network effect. The more people there are participating, the higher the quality of the product. The more playlists, shorter matchmaking times, better ping, more tweets, a higher rate of great tweets, a bigger audience for your tweets on either platform, more connections made, more friends and more jokes, more laughter and more love, more to learn and way more fucking dopamine. How much network effect has been sacrificed so that Activision and Musk can farm extra revenue out of the worst people in the world? What happens when all that's left on COD or Twitter is the small in-group of dullards with so little imagination they can't think of something better to spend their money on than hollow tokens of virtual status to try and fill the empty void left in the wake of their brutal apathy and entitlement? And most horrifyingly of all, what if the corruption of these platforms is just a symptom of a much larger rot in Western culture? I ended up buying the blue check mark myself. Despite checking Twitter every 3 to 7 minutes for the last decade, I don't actually tweet that much, but I do tweet out my new videos and it's important traffic, and even with a few thousand followers and having had an OG checkmark, my tweets got literally 0 views after the new microtransaction model, and so I realized I was gonna have to play along. Musk had fucking strong-armed me, so I did, and sure enough, my tweets went back to getting the kind of traffic they used to, and I was bitter, but it had to be done because this was the game of real life now. And in that moment, it occurred to me how much of the real world is locked behind microtransaction barriers the same way. Like if you want to be a star athlete or artist or whatever, you better hope your parents ponied up the cash to get you in all the clubs and extracurriculars from the time you were 2 years old. Otherwise, you'll never compete with the kids whose parents did. And what is college tuition if not the world's worst battle pass? A clear $20,000 to $150,000 dividing line, separating the haves from the have-nots, the salaried workers from the wage slaves. And now all public space punishes anyone not driving a car, so everyone has the car payment, insurance payment, maintenance, gas. To have any kind of real-world social life, you've got to be able to afford the bars, and that shit adds up. Running for public office is an absurdly costly endeavor, and so unsurprisingly, the majority of the Congress are millionaires, and we all know, and every study confirms, that people treat you so much differently based on how you look. So it's $75 designer plain white tees and $200 on makeup and body spray and breast implants and testosterone pills and overpriced gym memberships and Tinder Gold and Twitter Blue, and if you can't afford that shit, you're definitely not getting laid. But even then, it's another $2.99 for an orgasm on OnlyFans. It's a pay-to-play world, and a lot of people can't pay, and they don't get to have a life, and they don't get to move up in the world, and those that do, increasingly, their success isn't even celebrated, because as more people realize the game is broken, they'll only see success as an arbitrary measurement of whose parents had how much money. Because even if you succeed legitimately with your hard work and can-do attitude or whatever, at the top, how will anyone know the difference between you and the Ivy League legacy admission hired at Goldman Sachs because the CEO was his dad? And if the incentive system of society breaks down, if people's participation wanes because they know they can't compete with the guys whose parents give them small loans of $1 million to start their first business, or that even if they can compete, they'll just be called a Nepo baby for it in the end, what then? How much societal participation are we missing out on? And how do we measure the network effect loss as more and more citizens simply throw their hands up and stop giving it their all, and stop striving, and stop caring? How many potential innovators and entrepreneurs and artists remain stuck on the sidelines, shut out of the game by a tangled web of overpriced microtransactions set up by corporate overlords nickel and diming the whole world?